Hi everyone. Hello. Welcome to Mondays with Maya. So today is number 16. Mondays with Maya number 16. Today we are talking about stress. Today we're talking about stress. Hello. Hello. Hi Sandra. So we are talking about stress today, and two of the coping mechanisms we are going to talk about is sense of coherence and psychological hardiness. So for those of you who know me, I'm a sociologist, and my area of study is the sociology of health and illness, especially focusing currently on confidence and mental health and how we can raise confidence levels. So today what we're talking about is related to that, and it's all about how we deal with stress in unhealthy ways, and these are two of the coping strategies that have been the most researched in how we can develop a greater resilience to dealing with stress. Okay, cool. So let's break it down. So what is stress? What is stress? Okay, so it's the physical, emotional, cognitive, behavioral responses to an event or an experience that can be, hey Derek, that can be perceived as challenging, difficult, threatening. Stress can manifest itself in a few different ways. And let's break that down into how stress manifests itself physically. So that can be sleeping problems, frequent colds, chest pains, nausea, fatigue. People behave differently when they're stressed. So some people may, panic attacks for sure. So people behave differently, right? So some people may eat too much, some people may not eat. I'm one of those people that when I'm stressed, I can't digest. So I don't eat when I'm super stressed. Like I'll never eat 2 hours before I give a talk. It stresses me out to eat. So what else? So we could cry a little bit more, we could pace, we could smoke or drink a little bit more, we could perhaps do a little unhealthy things like maybe shop a little too much, or you're engaging in unhealthy behaviors that way. So emotionally, definitely an increase in panic attacks, increase in anxiety attacks, so increase in anxiety and depression, increase in fear and irritability, anger, frustration. That is how stress manifests itself for you emotionally. And then mentally, that can be problems in memory, memory recall. That can be yes to all of those. Yeah, I know. Me too, Sandra. Problems in concentration. Like when you're stressed, have you ever read something, whether it's a paper or a newspaper article, and you read it, and then you get midway through and you're like, what the hell am I reading? I don't even know. And then you have to reread that entire paragraph again. That's stress literally shutting your memory down. What else? You also lose your sense of humor. Isn't that so true? When you are stressed, nothing is friggin' funny. Nothing is funny, and you don't need people making jokes when you're stressed. Okay, so stressors can be everything from real immediate threats to you, like a car crash, being fire, hurricane, tornadoes, all sort of those things, right? To imaginary stresses, like you're 2 days late with filing your taxes, and now you think the Revenue Canada is going to come and take your home away tomorrow. This is when an imaginary threat, for instance, every time I would come home late as a teenager, my mom imagined me lying dead in a ditch. Like that's where her mind took her. Instead of just being like, well, maybe my daughter couldn't get to a phone because we didn't all have cell phones back then, or maybe she's having too much fun. My mom took it to the extreme. So imaginary threats. So there was this researcher called Antonovsky, and he wanted to know what made healthy people healthy. How could they withstand stress? A lot of sociological research looks at the opposite, what makes people unhealthy. But he flipped it, and he wanted to know what made people healthy. And he came up with a concept called coherence, or a sense of coherence. And the good news is that your sense of coherence can be developed over the life course, and it can be trained just like anything else, just like developing a growth mindset, just like developing a sense of optimism. All of that can be grown and it can be trained, right? So you can train yourself to have a better sense of coherence. So your sense of coherence is three aspects, and I'll break it down. So it's comprehensibility, manageability, and meaningfulness. Let's go through the first one. So that is comprehensibility. So this is the extent to which your life makes sense, the extent to which your life and your life events make sense. And this is when you believe that the world or your life or things around you are understandable and predictable. Having a sense of comprehensibility about yourself, your relationships, your friendships, your career, how your life is unfolding is basically essential for coping with stressful situations. So people who have a high sense of coherence feel that all this information they receive from their environment makes sense. They are meant to go through whatever they are going through. Things are orderly for them. It's clear, it's consistent. The steps that they are taking in life make sense to them. And they feel that the actions that they have taken in their life and the results that have happened for a reason, and these results will continue in the future, right? So that's comprehensibility. The second is manageability. And this is the expectation that things will work out as well as you can expect them to. And this is, again, so essential for handling life stressors. So a person with a high sense of coherence understands what is expected of them, what their managers at work expect from them, what their teachers at school expect from them, what their partner expects from them, what their friendships expect for them. And they have the ability and the resources to fulfill those expectations. And the third one is meaningfulness. And this is the extent to which you perceive your life and what is happening in your life as something that makes sense. That something makes sense emotionally. And this is linked to your motivation to keep going because you see a bigger picture happening. Things are happening for a reason. You may not understand it, but you believe that the pieces will fit together eventually to create a greater sense of why you're here and why you're going through these difficult things, right? And when you see things as happening for a reason, everything has a purpose. You have a purpose, your schooling has a purpose, your mistakes have a purpose, your career has a purpose, your failed relationships have a purpose, getting fired from your job has a purpose. Everything sort of falls into place when you see the meaningfulness of this. So after I graduated, I did a 2-year postdoc position. So I'd spent 2 years as a research assistant basically in the city of Hamilton, working with people who were homeless and battling addictions. And so every single month I had to interview and basically keep track of about 35 homeless or precariously housed people in downtown Hamilton. And every single month I would interview the same 35 people. And this is when this concept made sense to me. Like, I understood it intuitively, but I really saw it come to life when I was interviewing the homeless. And I would say to them, okay, so we're gonna do an interview. I just got to run inside to get my backpack that had like the interview questionnaires and whatnot, and I'll be right back. Like, just wait for me here on the sidewalk. I'll be back in 30 seconds. I'm just running into the building. I'd go into the building, get my backpack. I'd come out, and I would see them getting into a car, leaving. And these research participants were getting paid. I can't remember the denomination, maybe $25 gift card at the time. So it was a valuable amount. And it wasn't worth it for them because there was something else that came up. And so then I would try to find them the next day or the next week, and I would say, hey, remember, like, I was going to interview you and then you just took off. Like, what happened? And I would find out that they got a car ride to go see the doctor. And they had to take that chance. They had to take that opportunity to get the car ride to take X amount of kilometers to go to the doctors because they didn't know when that car ride was going to happen. And the gift card didn't matter to them because there was no stability in their life. Everything was sort of chaotic. And I just saw all those, that sense of commitment wasn't there, that sense of comprehensibility. Nothing made sense to them in their life. People that they counted on weren't there for them. And so when you research the homeless population, you find that most of them are there because of broken homes. Most of them are running away from a situation that is far worse at home than being on the streets. And so I really saw the difference between having social support made in people's lives, right? The amount of social support that I got growing up made a difference in my own level of coherence, manageability, my own sense of things will work out well for me because I had a history of things always working out well for me. And the people that I interviewed that were on the street all had several mental health conditions that were untreated, that were left undiagnosed for years and years. They didn't get the social support that they needed and wanted. They weren't taking their medications on a regular basis. And all of that impacted their ability to see a greater purpose and meaning for their life. Okay, so let's talk about a second concept. And this is the concept of psychological hardiness. Psychological hardiness. So this is a person's ability to manage stress and to respond to stressful life events with good coping strategies. Hardiness, a sense of hardiness, can predict how well you deal with stress, how you handle the obstacles and the hurdles and the barriers that come into your life. So hardiness is really a personality trait that can, again, be trained. You can learn this stuff. And hardiness and having that sense of hardiness distinguishes between people who have resilience and people who flounder when they're stressed. And this concept it came out in 1979 by a researcher named Kobasa. And she, at that time, was looking at high-level managers who were going through and executives who were going through a stressful turnover at work. And there were certain subset of managers who just kept on thriving under really, really stressful situations that other people were becoming overwhelmed with. And she found, after interviewing and following these managers for 6 years, she found that they exhibited a concept that she came up with, which was hardiness. So it's called hardiness, psychological hardiness, sense of hardiness. It's all the same concept. And hardiness has 3 components, the 3 C's: commitment, challenge, and control. And so the executives who thrived under stressful situations had high levels of commitment, challenge, and control. Now, originally, back in 1979, who were these executives? They were all white men. Since then, this study has been replicated and redone, and her husband actually ended up studying this concept also. And this sense of hardiness has now been researched for over 30 years, and they have found this with students and military vets and women and older people, and just a whole span, and athletes, a whole span of people. So men, women, gender non-binary, athletes, like you name it, veterans. There's been so many different groups of people who have been found to display hardiness. So what is it? Let's go through these 3 ones. Okay, so the first one is commitment. If you have a sense of hardiness, you will have a high sense of commitment. This is, again, sort of similar to that sense of coherence. This is when you have a sense of purpose and meaning in life. A sense of purpose and meaning in life where you actively involve yourself rather than being a passive recipient to whatever life is throwing at you. You are actively involved in doing and creating and managing your life rather than reacting to all the shit that comes at you, okay? So, you are actively involved in learning, self-growth, bettering yourself because you are curious. People who are committed tend to have a high curiosity. They ask questions. They want to know more. Why does this happen? And why did you do this? And how did that work out? So they're constantly trying to figure out how things can be better. They're just committed to learning. And people in this group tend to stick with it when it gets tough, when it becomes not fun, when it becomes sort of gritty. These are the ones that show high levels of commitment. They want to see things through, regardless of whether it's difficult. They have aligned that difficulty with a greater sense of purpose as to why they are going through it, okay? So the second one is challenge. So this is the belief that being challenged through obstacles and barriers is a good thing. Are these concepts based on personality traits you develop over the years? Is this easily developed, or is it something learned from childhood? Yeah, it can be learned through childhood, and you can absolutely develop hardiness in childhood, and you can also not have it and develop it later on. So they are, I believe that, is this Mel? Yeah, so you can develop this later on. It can be trained at any point in your life. It can be developed at any point, and it is a personality trait for sure. Okay, so where was I? Okay, yes. So this is when you see challenges, obstacles, barriers as information. Failure is information. An obstacle, interesting information for you. So you view challenges as opportunities rather than a sense of defeat. And that is huge. That is huge. So if you have a high level of challenge, that means you do not value the status quo. You don't value doing things the same way just because we've always done them that way before. You're not looking for stability. You're looking for growth. And you view change as normal, as part of life, but even bigger, you view change as part of your development. part of becoming a better parent, a better student, a better teacher, a better manager, a better employee. You don't view challenges and obstacles as a threat to yourself or your own personal potential for success or your own potential for security. And no matter, actually, no, that was a tip. Okay, I'll get to tips later. Okay, so the third one is control. So we just went through commitment and challenge, and now we're going through control. So this is people who have a high level of hardiness have a high level of control. They perceive that they can control events in their life because they believe they can control their reactions and their perceptions of what is happening to them, right? So this is all about acting in ways that develop your sense of control over your situation. So hardy people believe that they can influence their situation, influence their life, influence their career, rather than viewing themselves as helpless. They have sort of this internal sense of control, and they believe that their actions will influence their career, their education, their ambitions, their future plans. And so after about 35 years of research on this, there's actually, you can look up the main researcher on this. His name is Dr. Salvatore Maddi, M-A-D-D-I, and he has a Hardiness Institute. You can look up if you want more information for yourself on this. So again, people who have a high sense of hardiness are able to turn life stressors into life opportunities. If you want to sum up what hardiness is in one sentence, that's really it, is the ability to turn a life stressor into a life opportunity for personal growth, for personal benefit. Okay, so let's go through some tips on how do you then train yourself to develop a greater sense of hardiness. And one of the ways is, because this is a personality trait, right? This goes back to how you view situations. How are you viewing situations? Positively or negatively? So one of the main mechanisms for developing your sense of hardiness is changing how you perceive a situation in a more optimistic manner. And I want to just give you a quick study on optimism. And Judith, so there was a researcher named Judith Moskowitz, and she studied people who had been newly diagnosed with HIV. And she divided them into two groups. There was about 159 participants in this study, and she divided them into two groups. And one group got trained in optimism for 8 weeks. And the other group got trained in just general support. And what they found is the group that was trained in how to view situations more positively, which is how to develop optimism, were more likely to take their HIV medication, were less likely to need antidepressants, and were more likely to view their life positively, which is huge. This was a huge sort of monumental study, because for many people back in the day, getting an HIV classification was a death sentence. She was able to train people who had been newly diagnosed to have a positive outlook on their life, to develop a sense of meaning, a purpose, to feel like they had more control over their lives, right? She was developing that sense of hardiness. So what she trained them in was a set of 8 strategies, and I'm going to read those out to you. Okay, So these were 8 skills that she trained these participants in. And one was to recognize a positive event every single day. That sounds so simple, oh my gosh, but how many of us do that? To recognize one positive event that occurred every single day. And so if you listen to the previous episodes, right, where I talked about self-compassion, you'll see how this is linked to all the research around self-compassion and developing an appreciation for the good that is happening. So recognizing one positive thing a day. And it's helpful to do this if you write it out rather than just sort of think about it or tell somebody about it. Then the second step, right, is to do exactly what I just said, to either log it in a journal or tell somebody. But it's even better if you do both. Write it down in a journal and then talk about it with a friend, a coworker, a partner, somebody who believes in you. So the first one is to recognize a positive thing every day. The second one is to savor that, write it down in a journal and tell somebody about it. The third skill was to start a daily gratitude journal. And when you're writing in this gratitude journal, it's not about the big things. It's about the small, seemingly insignificant things that happen on a daily basis that we need to build greater awareness around. So starting a daily gratitude journal. Last week, I showed you my 2 gratitude journals that I use. It takes 2 minutes in the morning just to jot down 3 things that you are grateful for, or even just one thing that you are grateful for. Like, I'm grateful today, Mondays, my dad takes my daughter Ryo to school. So I'm grateful that my parents live 5 minutes up the road, that my dad is retired, and that he can help me out with Ryo. And so he comes Mondays and Thursdays and he takes her to school. And then I go to the window and I watch them walk on their way to school. And then I snap pictures because it's the cutest thing and it warms my heart. And so I'm so grateful that my dad lives close by and can do that. And I'm so grateful for Ryo's bond with her dada. She adores him. He adores her. And, you know, it's just like that little thing that I just really sort of love. And do you want to know what Ryo did today? Steve went to pick up Ryo at my parents', and lo and behold, Ryo had organized a play date. She's 6. She organized a play date for herself. She didn't run that by me. She didn't run that by Steve. And so a play date showed up at my parents' place because Ryo had friggin' organized it. And so we had to have a good long talk with Ryo. But thank goodness my parents were super sweet about it. And so they had a new play date at their place. Okay. So the 4th skill is to list a personal strength. Just list a personal characteristic, a personal strength of yours. And just to keep a catalog of your strengths. The 5th is to set an attainable, realistic goal for yourself and then to track your progress. A few weeks ago, we spoke about perfectionist tendencies, and one of the issues with perfectionism is the expectation for flawlessness. Perfectionists have unrealistic and unattainable goals for themselves, and then when they fail, they feel like shit. When they fail, they take that failure as a sign that they're not good enough, that they're not smart enough, and then that inner critic starts working overtime. So this is a skill set that is meant to help you temper down perfectionist tendencies. Because as we know, perfectionism is not helpful. Perfectionism hurts us, it makes us sicker, it makes us more depressed. It's not some badge of honor. So what we need to do is set more reasonable goals for ourselves and then track our progress. But what we end up doing is we set unrealistic goals, and then we go over why we failed and why we're such a fuck up and why we're such a loser and why we can't achieve anything, right? And then we get down on ourselves. Think about how often you have, whether it happened today or this or last week, how often in your mind you have mentally cataloged your mistakes, gone over everything that you failed at, everything that you messed up on, everything that you've procrastinated on, everything that you're not good enough at, everything that you feel guilty over, all that mental energy that you have taken up with that, and then compare that to all the time you have spent building yourself up, pumping yourself up, reminding yourself of your progress, and tracking all your progress, all the good things that you have achieved. And you'll see that there's a huge time discrepancy. We spend way more time shitting on ourselves than we do building ourselves up. And there is no sociological term for shitting on yourself. That's just what I say. Okay, the sixth skill was to report a relatively minor stress that's happening in your life. So think about some minor stress that's happening in your life and list the ways that you can reevaluate it in a more positive way. So you've got something that's happening to you, something that's kind of irritating you, something that's stressing you, not like a major life event. This is taking something that's a minor stressor, but that's still irritating you, that's still weighing on you, that's still taking up mental energy, and writing it down and then reevaluating how can you look at it differently? How can you list all the benefits of this thing? How can you figure out a way to stop reacting so negatively or stop giving this thing so much mental energy? Number 7 is to recognize and practice one small act of kindness every day. To recognize and to practice one small act of kindness every single day. So there's been so much work on the domino effect of kindness. It's very difficult, for instance, to smile at somebody you see on the sidewalk, someone that you're passing by, a stranger you don't know. But when you smile at them, the immediate reaction, the immediate response is to sort of smile back. And it's sort of like a contagious effect. Same thing when you just do one small thing, like you hold the door for somebody and they say thank you, right? So you're holding the door, that's one small act of kindness. They're saying thank you. They are acknowledging your kindness and they are sending it forward. I don't know if any of you have ever been at the drive-thru and then said to the cashier, I'll cover the cost of whoever's ordering behind me. I've done that before. But you know what I've done before? Also is I've been like, what did the person behind me order? Because if it's like a $25 order, I'm going to pass on that. But if it's like whatever, like a $5 Frappuccino, okay, fine, I'll cover that. And I'll do that every once in a while. And then I kind of watch in my rear view mirror to see the reaction. And you can see the person being like, handing over their credit card and being like, what? No? What? Who paid for it? And it just kind of makes you feel good. So doing these small acts of kindness helps to reframe how you view situations, how you view the world, how you view other humans. And then the last aspect is practicing mindfulness, right? So that's exactly what we were talking about a few weeks ago with self-compassion. All right, so Derek is asking, when you hold a door and they walk through like the president looking at you with disgust. Oh my gosh, I know. So sometimes, and this is a way to practice kindness, sometimes people do walk through that door and they don't say anything. And then, oh my gosh, like the fighter in me comes out and says, oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hello, I held the door for you. And so I'm practicing just doing an act of kindness without being acknowledged. So that is something that I'm working on because, yeah, that immediate sort of fighter in me wants to come out and be like, Hello, dude, I just held the door for you. Did you want to acknowledge that? Yes, so that's another step, right? Sort of just doing these things and not waiting for a thank you. So that was the 8 skills that Dr. Moskowitz used in her training session. And I'll give you another 3 tips that was used by researcher Susan Vaughn. So how can you help develop a more optimistic, positive outlook? And one is, she argues that we should, Rosalie says, I think it's because we expect everyone to respond the way we would. Oh my gosh, absolutely. That's my downfall. That's my Achilles heel. I have this expectation of how I think people should respond. And then when they don't respond that way, I'm all like, what? What are they doing? Who are these people? Where were they raised? How could they not say thank you? So that's like my own thing that I need to work on. Okay, so one of the tips is alternative thinking. So optimists when bad things happen, they take it less personally. They come up with alternative explanations, hence the reason why it's called alternative thinking. They come up with alternative explanations for why bad things happen. So optimists are more likely to attribute, for instance, if you're a student, you're more likely to attribute bad grades to the difficulty of the material, to poor study habits, rather than, oh, I'm just an idiot, I just didn't get the material. If you're doing public speaking for the first time and you mess up, an optimist is more likely to look at that and say, okay, how can I improve? What do I need to do? How do I need to practice more? Maybe I need to watch TED Talks. Maybe I need to read a book on public speaking. Whereas a pessimist is more likely to view their first failure as a public speaker as they shouldn't speak publicly again. They should not go into that career, right? So optimists view failures as opportunities, failures as growth opportunities, not as something that they are personally lacking. They are lacking a skill set that they can develop. That's all. And 2 is relaxation. So relaxation is about finding the joy for yourself, right? It's about self-care. And finding the joy for you may be different than what it is for me. But for a lot of people, it is some form of movement, some form of exercise. It is being in nature. It is yoga, Pilates, weights, running, walking, being with a pet, just stroking a dog, just petting a dog has soothing benefits. It is talking with a friend. It is journaling. It is reading. For me, it's iced coffee. It is meditation. Any of those things can help you add more joy into your life and help you decompress. But you've got to do it daily, right? This has to be something that becomes part of your daily practice. Okay, that's all I had. Actually, I have more, but I think that's enough. Well, I guess, okay, well, another part about trying to find more of the optimism in your life, the optimistic viewpoint, right? So that you can then develop your sense of hardiness by looking at challenges as opportunities, is to monitor your thinking, monitor your inner critic, monitor your negative self-thoughts. And the first step in doing this is, one, to recognize when it's actually happening, to stop in that moment and recognize when it is happening. And then the second is you have to disrupt that negative thought. So the problem for many of us is that inner negative thought occurs so often that it becomes unconscious. You don't even recognize that it's occurring because that negative voice then becomes your voice. And that's just who you think you are. And that can become really severely damaging if we leave that uncontrolled. And so one of the steps is to recognize when it's happening in that moment. And then a lot of researchers say to think about it as if it was coming from somebody else. So if your partner was speaking to you in the same way that you were speaking to yourself, you would probably stand up for yourself, right? If a good friend was saying, oh my gosh, you friggin' loser, you don't even know how to do that, you would stand up for yourself, right? You would recognize that that was an unhealthy relationship. And so to sort of recognize those internal negative thoughts as they are occurring and to recognize them for the hurt that it causes. And to challenge each negative thought, and this is really difficult, but every single time you have a negative thought about yourself, if you can catch yourself in that moment and immediately reframe it to a positive self-statement, to a redirection. So you have, let's say, that immediate thought to yourself is, I'm a failure. I'm constantly failing. To reframe it as, I have the right to fail. I have the right to make a mistake. It's called being human. And then just keep repeating that to yourself until that negative thought has elapsed. And that just may mean you're repeating it for 10 seconds, you're repeating it for a minute, and then continuing on with your day. And that is about it. I think that's all I had. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everybody. I always think we're going to speak like 15 minutes and then I just keep going on. So thank you for joining me today about psychological hardiness. Awesome. And I will see you next week. And what are you looking at? No. Okay. Steve's right there. Okay. That's about it. Thank you, everybody. I will see you. Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Derek. I'll see everybody next week.